Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emily Chang, the host of Bloomberg Technology, and with me today is Ned Segal, the CFO of Twitter. Ned, we get to talk every quarter about earnings, but I'm very excited to have a more expansive conversation today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to spend time on another topic.
I want to start with March 2020 and you taking us back as a business leader, as a parent, to that moment. And I'm sure there was confusion, maybe a little bit of terror when you realized you needed to send employees home, and how you came to that realization and ultimately decided we need to keep them there.
That's a great question. I give Jack a ton of credit because we were early and really clear on how we were making decisions and what decisions we were making. It was March 2nd, so really 9 days before the NBA shut down, before a lot of the higher profile things happened that caused companies to shut down a few days later, when we strongly encouraged our team all around the world to work from home. And on March 11th, we mandated that people work from home. And the way we got there was being really clear about what drove the decisions and communicating that to people. So we said, we're prioritizing minimizing spread of the virus and the health of our team, and then the continuity of the service. And when we told people that, when we told people the decisions that they made, I think they embraced how we got there and what the decisions were. And they valued working at a company that valued their health and the health of their families.
Now, Twitter was also early in telling employees they could work from home permanently if they want to, no matter what happens. And I'm curious if you're concerned about productivity or concerned about the fact that if it doesn't work out, it's really hard to take it back when you've told someone they can work from home forever.
Well, this was a decision that was really separate from the global pandemic. So for a couple of years, we've sought to decentralize our workforce. And what that means is we love the places where we have our 35 offices, but we don't want to be tied to those as we grow our team. Some people are more productive on their sofa in Montana, and others are more productive in an office because of their personality type, because of their job function, because sometimes of where the rest of their team sits. And we wanted to make sure that we could leverage technology and tools to allow people to work where they can be most productive. Now, this work was well underway, but substantially accelerated when we all were sent home in March. It gave us real empathy as leaders, as a guy who went into the office in San Francisco every day, for what it was like to not be in the room, to know what it's like when your internet is being used by your children for school and you're competing for bandwidth, to know what it's like to go hide to do a call or an interview that's important. And so the empathy that we've built through that has helped us design processes, create new tools, license tools from partners to make sure that people can be productive. So far, we're really pleased with what we've seen from a productivity perspective. That doesn't just mean, though, that we're shipping as fast as we were before. It also means that we've found ways to adapt to allow people to do their best work despite all the challenges that COVID has created.
So does that mean things are moving less quickly in some ways in terms of productivity?
No, I don't think they're moving less quickly, Emily. At the same time, I think it'll be years before we really know what the true impact is of this time period. For example, right now, 9 or 10 months in, a lot of the work that's happening at Twitter is based on things that we had started earlier. And so we are working really hard to create the space for people to be creative, for them to come up with new ideas, for them to have hallway conversations, albeit over a screen, so that they can benefit from the interactions that they need with their colleagues in order to create the next great feature or function on our service.
So when the safety and the health issues end, when there's a vaccine, how many employees do you think will actually go back to the office? What percentage of Twitter will work in the office versus working at home?
Well, we've surveyed people a number of times. And what we found from the surveys is a lot of what you get back has to do with where we are in the cycle of shelter in place, where we are in news about a vaccine, and a lot of other things that are going on in people's lives. Are their kids in school or are they home for the summer? And so the broader takeaway when we step back from a little bit of the noise that you get from one survey versus another is that people really value flexibility. They want to be able to work in the office sometimes and at home or another place other times. And I think that's something that hopefully we all take away from this environment is more flexibility and allowing people to work where they're most productive. I don't think we'll really know what that will look like, though, Emily, until we're far past a vaccine and people have come back to offices and seen what it's like to have choice, as opposed to now where we don't really have much choice.
Now, there's running the daily business of Twitter, and then there's the fact that news, every crisis, every controversy seems to also unfold on Twitter. How does that influence your day job?
Well, it influences it a lot for all of us. But thankfully, we've got a really strong policy team, a really strong product team, a really strong infrastructure team, all of whom are critical to making sure that Twitter's there for people, to make sure that in those moments that we're enacting our policies quickly and transparently, and to make sure that the product works in a way where people can find the things that they go to Twitter to look for. And so whether it's around Black Lives Matter back in June, where we saw lots of activity and conversation on Twitter, or the election just a few weeks ago, or the sports coming back to the world and to Twitter over the summer, it was so important that all those teams could work hard together in order to deliver for the people who come to the service.
Now, younger generations, many newer hires perhaps, are increasingly cognizant about sustainability and social issues. Obviously, the Black Lives Matter movement has been incredibly powerful and incredibly important over the last few months. You know, Twitter has historically been very active on these issues, showcasing these issues, addressing these issues within the company. Where is Twitter on that today, and how do you make sure that those issues stay relevant?
Well, the issues of sustainability, of respecting the environment, good corporate governance, these are things that are important to us as leaders of the company, but they're also so important, as you alluded to all of our stakeholders, whether it's an advertiser who wants to align themselves with a platform that they can be proud to have their ads serve on, content owners who want the highlights from their events showing up on a service where they can be proud, or the people who use the service and our employees and shareholders. And so one of the things that we know we need to do a better job of is to bring all this work that we do in support of those goals together for people to see in a cohesive way. We give employees $2,000 of matching funds to support the nonprofits of their choice. We invested $100 million, we announced a couple of weeks ago, into low-income communities in the United States. We are working in other ways, whether it's destaggering our board, which we announced a few weeks ago, or buying carbon offsets for our data centers and our flights to support the environment. And we'll work hard in the coming year to bring all that work together to help people see it cohesively, as opposed to the things that we do on a one-off basis.
Now, Coinbase and its CEO, Brian Armstrong, are right now in a storm of controversy after Armstrong said the company wouldn't take on activism around social issues that are not tied to crypto. Jack Dorsey has been very vocally opposed to this, as vocal as you can get in a tweet. Would you agree? Are they making a huge mistake? Are they going to be on the wrong side of history?
Well, it's not my place to judge another company and the choices that they make, but I'll share from our perspective. It is important to us that the people who work at our company can believe in and stand up for the things that they believe in. Many of them do it on our service. It could be about sports or politics or entertainment, or about the discussion around Coinbase. And we welcome all of them sharing their point of view, whether it's on Twitter or in how they spend their time outside of work, because we believe that that's an important part of serving the public conversation. We believe it's an important part of inviting people with all different perspectives to come to work at our company.
At the same time, it seems like a prime opportunity to poach or attract employees from a company that maybe do care about what Twitter cares about, and don't agree with the stand Coinbase is taking. Are your recruiters out there reaching out to Coinbase employees? Are you getting an influx of applications?
Well, we have hundreds of open roles right now. I hope you all will go to careers.twitter.com and take a look at them. And we find that when we're hiring people, we do really benefit from the fact that people want to work at a purpose-driven company. They want to work at a company that wants to serve the public conversation and is working really hard to do it, regardless of what the topic may be or what the point of view that the potential employee may bring to that conversation. A company of our size, people can come to Twitter and move the needle on the product. They can see their feature ship and see the impact that it can have on our metrics. And we find that can be really rewarding for people. And so whether it's Coinbase or any other company, we're delighted to have people come work at Twitter who really want to align with a purpose-driven company.
Now, Twitter invested $100 million in a new fund managed by the Opportunity Finance Network, which is aimed at combating racial injustice, poverty. You've also got a partnership on financial literacy. This was actually an investment and not a straight charity. Can you walk us through how that works and why you chose to do it that way?
Sure. So, Emily, we've got about $8 billion on our balance sheet, and we invest in all kinds of different securities, making sure that it grows a little bit, that it remains in place so that if we need it for acquisitions, to run the company, for share repurchase or other things, that we have that capital there ready to deploy. And we realized, and some of this was inspiration from others, where we watched Netflix and Square and PayPal and others invest in communities in other ways. We thought we should put some of this capital to work to benefit communities that don't have the same access to capital as some of the better capitalized communities do in the United States, mostly Black and Latinx communities. And we wanted to find a partner who could help us put that money to work, who had expertise around finding the projects, around finding the communities, and who was good at not losing their partner's money along the way. We didn't want to build up that expertise internally because we've got plenty of things that we feel like we're pretty good at, and we need to keep working on those instead. And so finding OFN and working with them to create a blueprint where not just Twitter could be in this fund, but where other companies don't have to do all the heavy lifting that we did in order to find the way that they also will contribute to better capitalizing low-income communities. We thought that was a really important part of the opportunity for us, was to create a blueprint for others.
Now, I ask you about this every chance I get because it is so fascinating. Jack Dorsey, your CEO, is also the CEO at Square. He cares a lot about equality. That has taken him on a lot of international trips. This is an issue that your investors care about. And I'm curious how it impacts you as a leader personally. The fact that Jack, has another job. How does that impact your ability to lead in a time of crisis?
So one of the great things about Jack is he's really clear where he can have impact and always being available for us in those ways. He has built a really strong team. He has created a really strong culture. He sets the principles that we use to do our work, and he's there for tough decisions. I'll tell you, I don't notice in a time like this where we're all working from somewhere other than the office where my teammates are at any given time, but I do measure by whether I can find them when I need them and whether they can find me when they need me. And just like all the other colleagues who I have, I can find Jack whenever I need him. We all feel tremendously accountable to each other. And in a lot of ways, this time has eliminated so many other distractions from our work. Airplanes, the commute from one conference room to another. And I think a lot of that we've all been able to give back to our time with our colleagues.
Now, caring about sustainability and social issues is one thing. Making it the number 1 priority is another. You recently said that revenue products are actually the top priority. I know in the past, Twitter has said health is a top priority. What actually is the top priority, and how do you make those trade-offs in the moment that you have to make those tough decisions?
So when we went into the shelter-in-place environment all around the world back in March, we realized that our revenue products needed long-term durability in a way that they could only achieve if they were the company's #1 objective. So they were one of the 5 company objectives, but they weren't the #1 objective. And we felt that by elevating them, that people inside the company would want to work on these projects. They would give them more of their time to the extent they were pulled in different directions. They would have clarity of purpose, the same way that they did around health a couple of years ago when we knew there was a lot of work that we had to do to catch up. And we've made lots of progress on health, which allowed us to keep that as a real important priority, but elevate revenue product to be the #1 priority. We want to make sure that through any economic environment, through secular shifts towards performance or direct response advertising, through shifts away from advertising, that we have the durability in our revenue streams to continue to deliver for shareholders, to continue to provide our service. It's been remarkable to watch how our focus has shifted a bit inside the company, where people who used to want to work on other teams now are excited about revenue product, where when we did the acquisition of Cross Install over the summer to help us with our direct response roadmap, how they were embraced as a part of this #1 company objective.
So, speaking of a potential revenue driving product, you recently launched fleets, which are disappearing tweets, taking the social pressure off a potential tweet, if you will. How are fleets going? How many people are using them? And when do you think you'll start advertising against them?
Well, we're pleased so far with how fleets have gone. They've been available in countries like Brazil and Italy for a lot longer than we've seen them in the United States. And they're solving the challenge that we're after at the highest level, which is we want people to be able to share their thoughts on Twitter however might make sense for them. That means audio, it means live video, it means ephemeral like fleets, so that you don't feel the pressure of knowing it's going to be injected into somebody's timeline, but it will be there for them to find. Over time, you'll see us continue to do work around this, where we want to reduce the friction to allow people to share what's on their mind. That may mean at various points that you could tweet and it might only go to certain communities as opposed to all of your followers. It also means today that sometimes you may choose to control who can respond to your tweet. We'll continue to do this work to reduce friction so that we can serve more and more of the public conversation on the service.
And when are we going to see ads on the inside?
Well, that's something that we continue to think about. And we've just got to weigh the benefits of putting ads on fleets with all the time that we could be spending making ads better or putting them in other places, whether it's the work we're doing around subscriptions or the work we're doing on direct response. But one of the things I have noticed, if you look at fleets over the last couple of weeks, it's been great to watch brands do organic usage of that important part of Twitter in order to connect with their customers. It's been a lot of fun to see how people are learning how to adjust to it and use it in a very Twitter authentic way.
Now, Twitter's also, a very consumer focused company. Fleets is part of that. And sadly, social issues often get intertwined with political issues, and you've got politicians on both sides of the aisle, often unhappy with Twitter. Republicans think you're censoring them. Democrats think you're not doing enough. You're getting antitrust scrutiny from all sides. Talk to us about how much politics play into the decisions, and especially the policy decisions that Twitter makes, given how much that Twitter itself cares about social issues.
Well, let me give you a really concrete example. Right now, a lot of people are talking about Section 230 from the Telecom Act of 1996. And Jack spent some time with the Senate in a couple different hearings in November talking about it. And I suspect it will be a big conversation in 2021. We have been talking about transparency and choice in those hearings as a way to solve people's concerns. We want people to know how an algorithm works. We want them to be able to choose whether to use it or not. It was over a year ago that we put a button at the top of the home timeline to give people the opportunity to switch back and forth between a purely chronological timeline and one where we use an algorithm to move things around so that we can hopefully show them things that are most relevant to them. When you give people that choice, when you make it transparent and easy, and by the way, we did it with very little testing, unsure what the real impact would be, but certain that it would be a way to continue to build trust with the people who use our service. That's the kind of thing that we do because of the principles that guide our work, not because of any pending debate or discussion about a legislation. And so we hope we can continue to be a part of this conversation around 230, but we'll continue to do the things that we think are right for Twitter because we think they're the right things to do, and our principles guide us there in the meantime.
Now, speaking of crisis, President Trump continues to use Twitter to make unfounded claims that he won the election, fraud, corruption. Attorney General Barr just told the Associated Press he's found no evidence of that to be true. What is Twitter doing to prepare for what could potentially be a very messy transition of power?
Well, we think about this election as three different phases. There's the time leading up to the election itself, and the post-election period, which we're in right now. And through all of those, it's so important to us that people can find the information that they're looking for, that they can trust what they see and feel safe being a part of the conversation. So we labeled who the candidates were. We made clear what our rules were, and even did some work around the election period to make sure that, although it was harder to retweet things, that we would minimize the amplification of things that may have been inaccurate or confusing to people. We put labels on tweets when people said things that were inaccurate or inconsistent with what other news organizations were saying. Through doing all of that, we feel like we've done a good job in helping people come to Twitter to find what they're looking for and to trust what they see. Now in this phase, it's important that we work with the government to have a transition of the accounts that represent the administration. It's important that we continue to enforce our rules and policies so that people can continue to build trust in the work that we're doing and come to Twitter as a trusted source of information and conversation.
You led me right to it. I mean, there's new concern about imposter accounts, which I guess happens every time there's an administration changeover, and some of the new folks who are about to be elevated. There are parody accounts, started to impersonate them. What is Twitter doing about that? How are you tracking that?
Well, we're always working hard to make sure that parody accounts around any type of thing, whether it's the CFO of Twitter or somebody else, as long as they're respectful, can exist, but making sure that people don't create accounts that confuse people about who the individual is who's speaking. That's why we label who candidates are and who elected officials are during an election period. And that's why we have specific accounts that are tied to certain roles that are available to people. And so we'll continue to use those rules and policies to help people understand who they're hearing from, whether it's around politics or sports or entertainment.
So when President Trump is out of office, does that make Ned Segal's job, the life of a Twitter employee, easier, or every day a little less of a crisis?
Well, it's interesting. I think in the United States, we take a very U.S.-centric view around public officials, but we've got leaders of so many countries who use Twitter to speak to the world, to speak to their constituents, to campaign. So the challenges that we face, it's such a dynamic company that's in the middle of so many conversations. They evolve from one year to another. I certainly didn't think, Emily, that you and I'd be sitting here having this conversation from our respective homes in a year ago when we were talking. But as the situation evolves around us, we're going to continue to be nimble and navigate whatever the challenges are that come our way.
Well, next year, this time, Ned, I hope we can do this in the studio. Where is Twitter going to be next year, this time? What are the crises that are on your horizons and your priorities for the next year?
Next year is going to be really exciting for Twitter. One, we're going to make real progress on our direct response roadmap. So we'll have better, more relevant ads for people. Two, we're going to work hard to continue to grow the audience. We have so many people, over 70 million people who follow a topic now, where we're doing the hard work to find accounts for you. We'll continue that work, and we think that will continue to help the audience metrics that are so important to us and a measure of our success in driving Twitter. I hope we've got a lot of people back in our offices, but I also hope that we've got a lot of people who just work where they find themselves to be most productive.